On the bill. Let me get some order again. Sergeant, members, if you got conversations, please take them to the side. We have a number of members wishing to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. McCravy is recognized for 17 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm kidding, Mr. McCravy. You're recognized.
I know. All right. So, I want to say to start with that I agree with the substance of the bill. I agree with limiting the power of the federal government. I agree with requiring the federal government to balance the budget. I don't have a problem with that. I agree with limiting terms for Congress. I'm good with that. And I want to say, first of all, that I do understand and respect Representative Taylor's tireless zeal to see that South Carolina stands for these principles. And, I even like his pushback agenda, and I've supported a lot of that and signed on to those bills. And I think and I think the people watching know that I'm one of the most socially and fiscally conservative persons in this body. And I understand that the people that came here today have the right motives, the people that held up the signs that were mentioned. And I tell you what they're concerned about. They're worried about our country, and they're looking for a solution to the problems that we have. And I respect that because I am too. And I also believe in our U.S. Constitution. I don't want to change our Constitution because it stood the test of time and was written by some of the greatest thinkers that ever lived. Our Constitution, to me, is like the oldest house on the block. It's had to be added on to several times. It's had renovations. We initially had to add on to it big time with the Bill of Rights. But, it's still the best house on the block. And so, yes, it's been necessary to amend the Constitution from time to time, and that was built into our Constitution. The way we've always done it for the last 230 years is by a 2/3 majority of both the Senate and the House, and then it's ratified by 38 states. That's the way it's supposed to be done. And here's the important part. We have never in our history ever used a national constitutional convention to change our convention. And why is that? Why have we never used it in 230 years? It's because a national convention of states is only appropriate when we're going to rewrite the entire Constitution. It cannot be controlled in scope, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. At such a convention, any amendments may be proposed. If you look on the board there on the third line, the plural amendments is there. It's there for a reason. And no matter what all the arguments have been made, you can't take that S off of amendment. It's there for a reason. So it cannot be controlled in scope. Any amendments can be proposed at a convention like this, and there's nothing to limit it. And it's been said many times that you can't limit it, but I'm just going to say it again. Don't fool yourself into thinking that if we have a constitutional convention, that it'll just be about a couple of conservative amendments. Oh no, it can't be limited. The plain meaning of Article 5 prevents that. And what's the proof of that? We have constitutional scholars on both sides of this argument, but the proof to me is the last time we had a constitutional convention like this was when? It was when we had the Articles of Confederation that were being considered, and we were supposed to go into the Articles of Confederation just talking about a very small amendment to it. And what happened? We threw out the entire Articles of Confederation, and we ended up with our convention. So that's proof that this convention will be different than what a lot of these people are thinking. So let's think about what it looks like. What would it look like? Well, first, each state would presumably send delegates, but who are these delegates? We don't know. We couldn't answer that question this morning because nobody knows. Some scholars say Congress will elect them. Some scholars say Congress will probably elect themselves as delegates. And so can you imagine, we could be looking at a convention composed, and this is my figure, of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer running things, making the rules of the convention. No, sir, this is not what I want, and I think with the craziness we have in Washington right now, we just don't need to risk this. So the men in Congress, the women in Congress, to me, are a far cry from the way our Congress was composed in the beginning and our Constitutional Convention was composed from the start. You know, the elephant in the room is whether a convention could result in unintended change to the treasured Constitution. And, you know, it reminds me, it's kind of like Greg Delaney was one of my mentors here. He was one of the few people that was older than I am that was here. And I respected his legal opinions on a lot of things. And he gave me permission today to use his name as opposing this convention. And he's a well-studied man, and he opposed it for a good reason. So this is a very important time. What could happen at the convention for you conservatives out there? It's been well described by the left-wing writers already as to what they want to do at our Constitutional Convention. In a progressive call for the Constitutional Convention, Roy Ulrich, a lecturer in the Political Science Department at the University of California, Berkeley, set forth his agenda for the left at such a convention. As for the issues progressives might want to consider, overturn Citizens United, eliminate the Electoral College, replace it with popular vote for president, expand the number of House members, establish regular and periodic Article 5 conventions, maybe every 25 years, so we can change the Constitution as we need to, establish a federal right to vote with federal laws on voting, no more state votes, state rights on voting, establish a federal right to privacy and a federal right to abortion in the Constitution, an affirmative right to food, we could have that, health care, shelter, mandate nonpartisan redistricting for the House of Representatives. This is what the left has planned for this agenda. Establish 25-year terms for the U.S. Supreme Court. Eliminate or rein in the filibuster in the Senate. Adopt the Equal Rights Amendment. Amend Article 5 from 3/4 to 2/3 ratification. He posed all kind of things to do. But, you know, conservatives are suspicious about the origin of this movement. The Democrats were the first ones to call for a constitutional convention in our state. During Jimmy Carter's reign, we had this body, a Democrat body, passed a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution and called for a constitutional convention. Y'all don't know that, probably a lot of you don't, in 1976. Well, when did we repeal that? By resolution. In 2004, this body, Mike Pitts, introduced the resolution, and we repealed that request for a convention, And let me just tell you what they said in this resolution. A Republican body repealed this. Whereas the General Assembly of the state of South Carolina, acting with the best of intentions, at various times has made applications to Congress to call one or more conventions. And this goes on. Whereas former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, Warren Burger, and other leading constitutional scholars agree that a convention may propose sweeping changes to the Constitution. Any limitations or restrictions purportedly imposed by the states in applying for such a convention, thereby creating an imminent peril. This body passed this, an imminent peril to the well-established rights of the citizens and duties. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America has been amended many times in history of this nation and may be amended many more times without the need to resort to a constitutional convention.
Mr. McCravy, I'm sorry, sir, that is your time limit. Mr. Bamberg's recognized.
All right, sir. I had one more sentence, and I was kind of interrupted
I know I
in the
tried,
beginning.
and my legal advisor told me the rules is the rules. So,
All right, sir.
I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Bamberg recognized.